Over the last 150 days, the Shanghai Gold Exchange cumulative volume between it and the Shanghai Metals Exchange and the Futures Exchange has increased over 200%, and that volume is now greater than the COMEX. It's now the second most traded exchange on the planet. It's beginning to have severe significance. But he said in 2015, when China is allowed to speak at the table, the real price of gold will be observed. And the BRICS countries just built something called the BRICS Grain Exchange. And the guy that's running it, he said, we produce more of the wheat and the soft commodities than the West does, and we consume more of it, yet we don't have any ability to affect its price. That's all done on COMEX, but with the establishment of this new grain exchange, that will change. They know what we're doing with metals, and they're using it against us. That's exactly right. The reason they're not bitching yet is because they're using the brain-dead Western suppression to drain the exchanges. That's exactly what they're doing. And then when there's no more companies or entities willing to sell at these prices, I believe that the legitimate price setting will move eastward to places like Shanghai, to places like Dubai and even Moscow, where these are the countries that appreciate, accumulate, stockpile, and understand metals better than the West does. We are now in Bretton Woods 3. Bretton Woods 1, when the dollar was backed by gold after World War II till 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window. Bretton Woods 2, when the dollar was tied to specifically and exclusively to oil purchases and oil sales through OPEC, which just ended about a month and a half ago when Saudi Arabia didn't cancel it, but said we're not going to be exclusive to the dollars. We're going to take other currencies too. Or Bretton Woods 3, this is all about commodities. But why? Think about it from a historical perspective. We're a country that is broke. We have a mountain of debt, 35 trillion. Trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. And when you think how big a trillion is, 31,688 years ago is a trillion seconds. We're at 35 trillion in debt. Our unfunded liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government military pensions are approaching 200 trillion. We'll never pay it back, ever. 77 trillion in Social Security, 99 trillion in Medicare Part B, 22 trillion in Medicare Part D. Just those three alone are 180 trillion in unfunded liabilities. You look at the U.S. government's balance sheet. Google, what is the asset base, or what are the largest assets of the U.S. government? It's $5 trillion. The largest asset of the U.S. government is student debt of $1.6 trillion. That's it. Now, the country has more money, but the U.S. government has $5 trillion in assets with up to $200 trillion in liabilities. We're broke. We're insolvent. We are viewed by most of the world as being wholly hypocritical. And we can say to Janet Yellen, can say to CNN, we're okay with Xi and Putin being friends in BRICS. Thank you, Madam Secretary. That's great. But if Xi gives one penny to Putin or his war machine, we will sanction China's banks, their companies, and Beijing itself. Never mind the over 160 trillion, or 260 billion rather, that we've given to the Ukraine, much in the way of weapons, the Stinger missiles, the F-16 jets, the intelligence on where to shoot it, training Ukrainian pilots in the Arizona desert, all of this stuff, that doesn't matter because we're the world reserve currency. And then what did they do? Then they confiscated, which is the same thing as stealing, which is the same thing as defaulting, on $5 trillion in Russian treasuries here in the U.S., and used them to give, mostly in the form of weapons, think silver again, military-industrial complex, to the Ukraine, the country they're in a war against. So as the world reserve currency, it is not our prerogative to go around the world sanctioning everyone, where the West right now is sanctioning 60% of all the underdeveloped countries. We went to Iraq 21 years ago, under the guise of weapons of mass destruction. We're sorry we didn't find them. We destroyed your country, toppled your regime, and guess what? We're still here, sanctioning 14 of your banks for trying to buy liquid natural gas funneled through Iranian banks. And they made $90 billion in oil revenue last year. That's all held at the New York Fed. They can't even control their own natural resource revenue 20 years after supposedly installing a new regime and doing it the right way, looking for those weapons of mass destruction, saving the world. We didn't find any of it. And here we are. They asked us for $1 billion at the end of 23. We said, no, sorry, we're busy. It's your money. Come back. We'll give it to you next year. So what have they done? They've made trading in dollars illegal. If you do so and own a business, you'll end up in jail. They've gotten rid of all green bills as of January 1. There are none in Iraq, none in any bank. They've officially applied to BRICS, and they're kicking Western coalition forces out of the country. They look at us as being wholly hypocritical. So we can go around the world imposing sanctions using our treasuries as weapon No, these are ours now because we don't like the way you play. It doesn't matter how we play. We're the world reserve currency. Our you-know-what doesn't stink, but we can tell you what to do. So the rest of the world says, well, let's see. Gold has doubled the performance of the 10-year treasury, doubled it for 25 years with no counterparty risk. And so what they are slowly doing on top of selling dollars and repositioning, which is called de-dollarizing, this isn't a word, but you'll get my point. They are detreasurizing also. They are slowly, instead of dumping treasuries, which causes too much attention, they used to roll them over. Every time they would expire, they would just roll it over and buy a new one, finance our exorbitant lifestyle, finance our debt binging society. Now they're not. Instead of them not rolling them over, they're buying commodities, like Zoltan Pozsar says, he or she who has the commodities in Bretton Woods 3 wins. They're buying gold because it's doubled its performance. It has no counterparty liability. It can't be stolen. And if we look at the new BRICS ecosystem, the unit settlement token, which has been agreed upon in principle, according to the head of the BRICS New Development Bank, Dilma Rousseff, who was the former president of Brazil, you end up with a new system that needs gold. And if they enact a system where all of a sudden it is a common settlement currency backed by gold in a basket of BRICS plus currencies, the need to hold dollars, gone. The need to hold treasuries, gone. And like that, the whole thing snaps. Now, you could argue, I always, people give me a hard time because I say little by little by little, then all at once. This logarithmic decay, I always say, but this is what's happening. Little by little, the world is de-dollarizing and selling treasuries, not too fast to cut off their nose, despite their face. Little by little, they're draining the exchanges of all of the world's commodities, not just gold and silver. China just bought the London Metals Exchange. That's the biggest exchange in the world for base metals. They're going all around the world in their Belt Road and striking deals in BRICS with all these underdeveloped countries that are resource rich. And they're doing it cooperatively instead of coercively. Even the name of their Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional military organization in the world, which Iran and Saudi Arabia just joined. All of these things are little by little by little chipping away at the dollar hegemony, which is gone. It's the supremacy that's not gone yet, but that's next.
Right.
And when these countries, if indeed all of the oil-producing countries agree to the new BRICS settlement currency called the unit, it will change the landscape of this country forever. And when you bring it all the way back home, the craziest part about it all is that our lead economic advisor to the United States government right now, many of you probably saw his stupidity trying to explain bond sales and money creation and on Twitter a few months ago. The guy couldn't even speak. This is a guy who has a degree in music and a master's degree in social work. A master's degree in social work. He is an inclusionary economist, a modern monetary theorist knucklehead who says we shouldn't have the world reserve currency. He has written a report called Dethrone King Dollar where he advocates for this. So if you think about it, what better way to lose the reserve currency than to weaponize the dollar, to tell Saudi Arabia, hey, we're going green. Thanks anyway. It's been great run. We're going green. We're not going to really need fossil fuels anymore. And then let the country go to all of the things that made this country great. All of a sudden, people are like, is this bizarro world we're living in? Or is it too stupid to be stupid? Could all of this be planned so that the world dumps dollars and that we reset the system? And instead of blaming the Fed and the fiscal irresponsibility of the Treasury Department for destroying the American dream, we can blame Xi Jinping, Putin, and OPEC for dumping the dollar. After all, we incentivize the hell out of them to do it. But the public, well, they don't know that. The media doesn't report any of this. You got to dig, and read every day like I do, even to come close to finding this stuff out. And if you don't, you'll just think that we are victims to this awful thing that destroyed the reserve currency. The whole thing resets as every country in the world who's had to stockpile dollars and treasuries has no need to do that anymore, dumps them. And this is why I've been saying for the last 2 years that you will see the Western system, the COMEX and the LBMA, exposed for what it is. It is a scam, if you will, where the futures market is controlling the price of the underlying commodity, and it's not right. So let me just read this to you because it's very telling. He says, the second part of this new currency is price. For the moment, price is determined by Western speculation. Very true. We produce these commodities, we consume them, but we do not have our own price mechanism, which will balance supply and demand. Now, during the COVID pandemic, the price for oil fell to nearly zero. Now, he's wrong there. It fell to negative $40 a barrel. Kind of I guess that encapsulates my point where an exchange can push oil down to -40 a barrel. That's not right. Anyways, he says, it's impossible to make any strategic planning for economic development if you do not control prices of basic commodities. Price formation with this new currency should get rid of the Western exchanges of commodities. Because James Rickards came out and publicly said that they're going to issue a common settlement currency at the August meeting in Johannesburg last year, I think a lot of people, when they came out of that meeting and said, no, we're going to task our finance ministers with going back to the drawing board and presenting their new findings at the meeting here in Russia in October, people said it's a nothing burger. I look at it differently. Like in crypto speak, mass adoption. Well, 35 more countries have formally applied to the BRICS, and another 20 plus have informally applied. Take a look at what Saudi Arabia has done in the span of just a couple of years. They've joined the BRICS. They have applied to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional financial and military organization on the planet. And they too will join BRICS, as James Rickards said, and as I've been saying for 3 years, because they're the same countries that are all invested in the Belt Road Initiative, in the BRICS, in the new BRICS Development Bank that Saudi Arabia also applied to. Saudi Arabia signed military agreements with Russia for protection, and it's the protection of the Saudi kingdom that gives us the dollar hegemony. So when you have a country that signs an executive order to go green, that Biden did, that weaponizes the dollar, where our brain-dead Treasury Secretary goes to Brazil just a few weeks ago in Russia's backyard, part of the BRICS, and says, look, we need to not just sanction the Russian 380 billion in Forex reserves, we need to confiscate it to rebuild the Ukraine. So we are a country that if you do not align with us ideologically, well, we're going to take your assets, not just sanction them like we did Iran, but we're going to take them. And you know what? We don't need you anymore, Saudi Arabia. And even though it is the linchpin of the dollar hegemony, you know, our protection of Saudi Arabia is what has made them, and by extension, OPEC, value the dollar or oil in dollars and then recycle the excess in U.S. treasuries. Well, look at what they've been doing. Aside from all of these relationships they have been making, aside from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, you know, saying China was our most important trading partner this year, but for the next 50, well, those numbers are important. The last 50 years, it was 50 years ago that we signed the Petro agreement. So we are putting ourselves in a place to lose the world reserve status. But when you talk about gold, look, all of these countries have been accumulating gold, in particular the Chinese, for 16 straight months in a row. And just like the finance minister, Sergei Glaziev, said a few years ago, that they are going to issue a common settlement currency in time that will be a basket of local currencies and a basket of commodities. Well, lo and behold, we just heard this a couple of days ago. And there was an interview that was done on, I think it's called TASS, T-A-S-S, and it's a news agency in Russia. I think it's really worth people reading and going to. It's usually a few days ahead of Zero Hedge. Anyways, the gentleman who was interviewed there came out and said exactly this, that yes, we can confirm that we are in the process of working on a two-basket currency, one of local currencies and the other of commodities. Now, we know all of this, and we know that gold being tier one is probably going to be very relevant in this. This is all stuff we know. And he also came out and said it will be digital, just like the project M-Bridge, which was developed by Singapore, China, and the United Arab Emirates, which allows central bank digital currencies to trade cross-border without using the SWIFT system. In fact, there were just a few trades done recently. So they said it will be digital, with two baskets of currencies. But I want to read you what he said. And this to me is the most important thing to take away from, I think, what's going on with the BRICS, what's going on with the new currency, what's going on with their accumulation of gold, because it will, just like Zoltan Pozar said, we're entering into a system of commodities and transparency. But here's what they had to say. And this is why I've been saying for the last 2 years that you will see the Western system, the COMEX and the LBMA, exposed for what it is. It is a scam, if you will, where the futures market is controlling the price of the underlying commodity, and it's not right. So let me just read this to you because it's very telling. He says, the second part of this new currency is price. For the moment, price is determined by Western speculation. Very true. We produce these commodities, we consume them, but we do not have our own price mechanism, which will balance supply and demand. Here enters the Moscow Exchange for Metals. Here enters the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Here enters the exchange in Dubai, where these, I believe, will be the epicenters for commodity pricing. Now, it's also fair to note two other things. One, The Chinese bought the LME, the London Metal Exchange, about 3-4 years ago. And the LME is largely a base metal exchange. They do some precious metals, but mostly copper, zinc, lead, steel, aluminum, all of that kind of stuff. And they just said they're going to start warehousing in China the metals that are traded on the LME. So it's precious metals, it's base metals, and they just came out the other day and said they are going to issue now the BRICS Grain Exchange because all of the prices are primarily determined by the Chicago Commodity Exchange. So what they are doing, and think of mass adoption, think of doing things methodically, think of doing things the right way before you pull the trigger, little by little by little, then bang all at once. They are literally cornering all of the commodities from soft metals like corn and wheat and soybeans, which are now, the Chinese are canceling all sorts of these contracts with American farmers and buying them from Brazil, paying for it in yuan, which is immediately convertible into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And then they own gold, the only other tier 1 asset. So they are building a grain exchange to get rid of the COMEX and the Mercantile Exchange. They own the LME, which ultimately will be the platform for all industrial metals, and they are pickpocketing, using the Western suppression of price, everything that is not nailed down, where 400 million ounces of silver nearly have been delivered off of COMEX in the last 2 years. That's almost exactly what India has imported. So you can see this is very methodical. And I think they're using the suppression and the leverage of the West against us until there's no one stupid enough to deliver at these prices. And then you get that all at once moment where the prices are then quoted on the other exchanges. And last point, the Shanghai Metals Exchange right now is starting to kind of do that. They're turning up the arbitrage heat. Silver is priced $3 an ounce higher in Shanghai than it is in the United States and in London. And gold is about $80 higher. So the sophisticated traders who have access to all three markets will buy in London, they'll buy in Chicago, and they'll deliver in Shanghai. Little by little by little by little, they are accumulating what Zoltan Pozsar said, a system dominated by commodities and transparency, not opaque debt instruments. So I think it's a big deal. It's a big deal what's going on with the BRICS accumulating metals, for sure.